maybe just while we're waiting, what did you do for flights today, Vanessa?
Sorry, I took one of my students up, and we basically did laps around the airport, what we call circuits. And so they're able to practice takeoffs and landings kind of in sequence. So they can work on that and then get experience talking on the radio with other traffic as well. And it really just kind of uses all the skills that they've learned so far. And so, yeah, it's lots of fun.
Good. Good. Your student had fun?
Yeah, she did have lots of fun.
Good. Michael, you know what's coming next?
I think I can hazard a guess, yeah. So this morning I flew with, I did kind of the same as Vanessa. We did some circuits together with one of my private students. So he did his first solo probably a couple of days ago. And so today we did what's known as a second solo. So I went up with him and we did 2 takeoffs and landings together. And then I got out and let him do 3 or 4 takeoffs and landings by himself. So it was exciting. He definitely had a big thrill out of it when he came back. So that was good.
Okay. How much time did the individual have in the airplane before you sent him out on his own?
Roughly about 13 hours for the first time and about 15 hours today for the second time. So 13 hours when he went by himself for the first time.
Cool. Good.
We could probably get going now. I think probably 10 after. Most people who are going to attend are probably here now. So I will leave it up to you guys to take it away. You guys are the experts.
Okay, sounds good. And as I mentioned earlier, Vanessa is going to start off by teaching us a little bit about, I think it's attitudes and movements and how airplanes are controlled. And after that, we'll go in, we'll have Michael talk to us about weather. Whenever you're ready there, Vanessa.
Okay, yeah, so I'm just going to talk about attitudes and movements. I just unfortunately can't be here to show you in person, but I have a PowerPoint. Hopefully that we'll be able to show you. So attitudes and movements is basically what you would do for your first flight if you were to start training. And it's basically just showing how the airplane moves and what you do inside to manipulate the plane where you want. So I'm just going to share a PowerPoint. Oh, it's not letting me share a screen.
Mark, you might have to, since you have permission, you're just going to have to go in and give her permission to do that. So. Sorry, Zoom's so hard. Even though it's been a year, everyone's still, I feel like, trying to get used to it. So there we go.
No worries. I think you're the host now, Vanessa.
Okay, there we go. Okay. So I hope you all can see that. So yeah, so I'm going to talk about attitudes and movements. So attitudes is the position of the aircraft relative to the horizon. So in space, how the plane is positioned in the air. And we use the horizon where the sky meets the ground as a reference point for most of or all of our attitudes. And movements are how we manipulate the different controls in the airplane to achieve these movements. So it's a very hands and feet type feeling. So the plane moves based off 3 axes. So the first is the lateral axis, which is along the wings. And basically the plane kind of rotates up and down along its wings. And then the other one is the longitudinal axis, where the plane kind of rotates side to side. It's along from the front to the tail of the plane. And then the third one is the vertical axis, where the plane kind of rotates a bit like a fish. And I'll talk about how we achieve all of these and what they're used for, and how inside the plane you use the controls to achieve these. So we reference all of our attitudes based off the horizon. And our most basic attitude is the cruise attitude. And this is where the plane is level with the horizon. And if you were flying it perfectly, you would just be flying completely parallel to the ground directly at the horizon. So just like in this picture, the plane, the entire plane is parallel to the horizon. And so that's what it looks like outside the plane. And then inside, the cruise attitude looks a bit like this, where the dash and the wings would be level with the horizon, and you would be flying completely parallel to it. And it's from this attitude, the cruise attitude, that we base all of our other attitudes off of. So we'll start with nose up and nose down attitudes. So here in the center, we have the cruise attitude, and then we have the nose up attitude, which is any attitude higher than the cruise attitude, like the picture on the left. And then the nose down attitude, which is when the nose is pointed down towards the ground, lower than the cruise attitude, which is shown on the right. And so inside the plane, the nose up attitude looks a bit like this, where you see much more sky. The ground has now fallen below the dash line, so you can't see it as well. Yeah, so sky is getting bigger and the ground is getting smaller. And then the nose down attitude looks a bit like this, where you see much more ground, and the horizon is a little bit higher, and yeah, the ground is getting bigger. And so this again is based off the lateral axis, and it rotates a bit like this, and the nose, and it yeah, rotates like that, and the nose comes up and down. And so how do we achieve these? We use what we call the control column. And for nose up attitude, you pull back on the control column. And for a nose down attitude, you push forward. And these controls, when you move the control column forward and back, moves what we call the elevators at the back. They're on the tail of the plane, and they deflect when you move the control column. And that's how you achieve the different nose up and nose down attitudes. And so the next attitude we use is called the banked attitude. And this is when the plane kind of rotates side to side. And so it's when the nose and as well the wings are not parallel to the horizon. So as you can see in the other pictures, the center one, the cruise attitude, the wings are level with the horizon. And then when it's in a banked attitude, it's not. So that's what it looks like from the outside. And then when you're inside the plane, it looks a bit like this. So the dash is no longer parallel with the horizon. It kind of meets the horizon at an angle like this. And this is achieved by rotating the plane along its longitudinal axis, and what we call roll, and it rolls kind of back and forth like this. And so how do we achieve this? You use a control column as well, and you rotate the control column either left or right, depending on which way you want to bank the plane. So as you can see, the control column here is rotated to the left. And when you do this, when you rotate the control column left or right, what you are doing is you're deflecting the ailerons on the wings, and they deflect and they cause the plane to move into the banked attitude. And so the last different type of movement that the plane does is called yaw. And so this is about the vertical axis, so it's straight down the center of the plane, and the plane kind of rotates a bit like this, It's a bit, I like to think of it like a bit like a fish. And how you get the plane to move like this is we use our rudder pedals. So they're located just like the car, but now there's two pedals, and you can push them and it will cause the plane to yaw side to side. And that moves the rudder, the big rudder at the back of the plane on the tail. And that deflects as you move the pedals. So those are the different attitudes and different movements that we use in the plane. And another thing that you would learn about when you start flying and do attitudes and movements is, so we're flying this plane and we're moving it in different ways. And there's different forces on the plane that are keeping us in the air and are acting on the plane while we're flying. So there's lift, obviously that's what lifting us up, keeping us in the air. And then weight, obviously the plane weighs something and so it's acting downwards. And then thrust, that's what's propelling us forward from the engine. And then what we call drag. So like when you're in a car, usually fancy cars are very aerodynamic because they don't want to be like a big box, creating lots of kind of friction as you fly. There's drag coming from the plane while you're flying. So these are the different forces acting on the plane. And lift, how we achieve lift is basically as the air passes over the wing. It's the way the wing is designed. There's a bit of faster airflow over the top and slower underneath, and it creates a pressure difference. And so there's higher pressure down below and it's lower at the top. And so this is the higher pressure is causing, is creating this lift, and that's what's basically helping us, lifting us in the air, helping us fly. So that's very basic how lift is made. And I will share this link. You can click on it or copy and paste it. And it's just a video explaining the different attitudes and movements as well. So if you're interested, you can click on it and you can watch it later.
I don't think they can click on it, Vanessa. What you might want to do is copy it and put it into the chat session afterwards, so that they can try it later.
Sure, I'll do that. Yeah, so that's our attitudes and movement lesson. I'll copy and paste it and put it in the comment section afterwards. Yeah, are there any questions?
Maybe something you can do, Vanessa, is that's kind of the preparatory ground instruction that you give just before you go flying. What would you go out and do in the airplane after that?
Yeah, so after this, we would go in the plane and we would take off and we would go out into a nice area where we can see the horizon, a good spot where you can see where the sky and the ground they meet, and it's nice and flat. And we would go, we would practice this. You would move the control column and you would see how the sky gets smaller and the ground gets bigger when you push forward, and as well when you pitch it up. And then you would bank the plane, and then you would get all familiar with the different kinds of movements.
Cool. Well, thanks for that. I don't see anybody raising their hand or anything like that asking any questions. Michael.
I was going to say Vanessa did this with me yesterday. I so appreciate it. It was so much fun. She actually took me over the lake because Kelowna is a great location. The terrain's amazing here just because you get such diverse with the mountains and lake and all that. So she took me over. If you're unfamiliar with Kelowna, there's two different sides. So there's a bridge that attaches the west side to the main side. So she actually took me over the bridge area, so over the lake, and she did the same exercise. So all the altitudes and turning and making sure the wing was parallel to the mountains. And it was so cool. The experience is amazing. We actually did post something on our social media, actually, of her teaching me yesterday. So I'll put our social media handles in the chat here, and you can go check it out. Honestly, it was so cool. She sold me on it. I want to start the program. So yeah, anyways, I'll hand it back over to you guys now.
Yeah, well, that's good. We like people enjoying it, don't we? Good job there, Vanessa. Good. Okay, Michael, do you want to start rolling us through the world of meteorology, the fancy name for weather out there, so everybody knows what they're looking at when they go outside?
I would be delighted. So I was wondering if you could give me the ability to, I might have that already now, I'm just give it a try here. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Sorry, is it letting you in?
No, not yet.
Okay. I think, Vanessa, you have to turn me back over to be the manager or whatever on this, please.
How do I do that?
So if you just go, my correctors, we should go to become a host.
Oh, I see.
Co-host. And it will make me a co-host. Okay, you're good there, Michael.
Thank you.
All right, can everyone see the PowerPoint here? I think we're good.
Yeah, looks good.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so meteorology, fancy word for weather. Right? Why do we concern ourselves with it? Obviously, as pilots, and when we're going to go fly airplanes, weather obviously becomes a very big factor in our decision making and just operation of the airplane and all that kind of stuff. So meteorology is very critical to the training of a pilot. So obviously, one of the main things that we talk about when we first start teaching meteorology is clouds. Because funny enough, there are multiple different types of clouds. It's not just one puffy thing up there and they're all the same. So there's a couple different types of clouds that we gotta know. There we go. So clouds are kind of generally put into 4 different classes. So we got low, middle, high, and clouds of vertical development. So obviously low, middle, high referring to how close they are to the ground. So we got low clouds, they stay close to the ground, right? Middle clouds are sort of higher up, and the high clouds are really, really high up in the atmosphere. So for high layer clouds, you can see 20,000 feet. To put that into perspective, the Kelowna airport is at about 1,400 feet above sea level. So high layer clouds, they start at 20,000 feet and go up from there. So obviously they are quite high up, and actually quite surprisingly enough, in some tropical regions, they can go all the way up to 60,000. So they're known as cirrus, so anything with a CI in front of it, or cirro, is what we will use to classify these clouds. So cirrus or cirrostratus or cirrocumulus are the 3 main types. So they mainly consist of ice crystals, right? Clouds, basically, how cloud forms, just simply put, is what happens is clouds form when water vapor, it condenses into either liquid water or sublimates into ice crystals. So obviously for the higher layer clouds, it's very cold up there. So they will be mostly consist of ice crystals or ice particles. And then lower clouds, obviously where it's warmer, they'll have actual liquid water content in them. So we have cirrus. They look like this, right? Most of the seen at this point, they're fairly high up. They're usually they seem very thin and sort of wispy. They kind of get blown around in a big area. That's usually done by the wind. Obviously, higher up you go, stronger the wind is. So these clouds kind of get blown around, so they create this sort of stringy kind of appearance to it. Then we have Cirrostratus, so they're also a high layer cloud, a little bit less wispy than sort of just your general cirrus here. For one of them on the bottom right here, you can actually see a sort of halo or sundog around the sun or moon. So that's another indicator of some cirrostratus clouds around. All right, and then we also have Cirrocumulus. So they're high at base. They be kind of sometimes called macro skies. It's a little bit. So they're a little closer banded together. So Cirrocumulus, it's more of a sort of sheet of cloud higher up, not really the very thin wispy stuff that's really far spread apart that you saw with just your classic cirrus. Right, so after we have our high level clouds, we kind of start working our way down. So we have sort of more middle layer clouds. So they're about 6,500 to 20,000 feet. So basically from the base of the high layer clouds to the tops of the low layer clouds, which we'll talk about a little further here. So any kind of middle layer cloud will have the prefix alto, which literally means middle. So that's how they came up with that one. So a couple of different general types. We have Altocumulus, Altostratus, and a very fun name of Altocumulus Castellanus. So they can consist of ice crystals or water droplets, really depending on what the temperature is at the certain height of that cloud. So this is what Altocumulus looks like. So they're frequently found in layers. So they kind of, there's sort of little gaps between it, but a bunch of little sort of layers that are close together. So you can think of it, they appear in patches, kind of stuck together like that. Sometimes they can actually obscure beyond the point where you can see, so they can actually obscure the whole sky or as much as you can see by just looking up. So these clouds usually indicate pretty good flying conditions, so they're not a really big concern to most airplanes here. We have Altostratus. So Altostratus, as you can see here, that kind of have a sun or a moon in the background there. I think it's a sun. So you can see it's sort of obscuring it, which would give you the idea that it's more of a stable layer, just like just a complete layer, not like this one that has just a bunch of patches together. This is actually just a straight solid layer of cloud altogether. So usually if you see this kind of stuff starting to move in anywhere near you, it's a likely indicator of some kind of incoming precipitation. That'll start, a little bit later once these start to arrive. It's kind of the first indications you can look at. Thing change in here. Perfect. Then we also have Altocumulus Castellanus, so another middle type cloud. They're usually very wide, so you can see in this picture it's sort of one little band of clouds together that span out over a very large area. So if you see this kind of stuff around, could be like the initial indicators of sort of thunderstorm cloud development, and also they can indicate just a little bit of turbulence. One of the things you got to kind of be prepared for if you're flying in the vicinity of these. Then we got our low layer clouds. So these are the ones that we see most of the time. These are the ones obviously for us when we're doing most of our flying. Obviously we're not climbing up to 20,000 feet with our Cessnas. So low level clouds or low layer clouds are obviously what affect us most of the time here. So yeah, so from the surface of the ground to about 6,500 feet, so not very high up. So any kind of low layer cloud is known as just a stratus. So you have Stratus Fractus, Stratocumulus, or Nimbostratus. So they consist of water droplets and ice crystals. Obviously being closer to the surface, usually the cloud temperature is warmer. So a lot of the time they'll consist of actual water droplets. So the term nimbo, if anyone's curious, it basically means rain. It does mean rain. So if your Nimbostratus cloud is a big rain cloud, so you can expect a lot of rain, constant, very wet. So stratus looks like this. Basically just your obviously clouds lower to the ground. You can see it usually they obscure most of the sky. Pretty thick looking cloud here. Stratus Fractus is a little less intimidating looking than this. So you can see they're just very small patches of cloud that are kind of wispy apart from each other, but they can come together and form more of a stratus layer if the conditions are right for that. Stratocumulus. So once again, they're sort of grayish or whitish low-lying clouds. They're pretty easily identifiable. If you see them at the sky, like obviously the top left picture here, very common sight around usually. So they tend to be a little flat and wavy at the top. So you can see they're flat at the bottom and they have sort of a wave near the tops of them. And then we have our Nimbostratus. So those are our big precipitation clouds, big rain clouds. So it just means continuous rain. Obviously Nimbus means rain. So you can expect large, wide scale, continuous rainfall. And then last but not least, we have our wonderful clouds of vertical development. These are probably the main type of cloud here that will provide the most risk to airplanes that'll fly around them or in the vicinity of them. So they're basically cumulus type clouds and they build vertically, hence the name vertical development. So they build more straight up rather than horizontal like we saw with the Stratus type cloud and the Nimbostratus. So the base is determined by the temperature dew point spread. Basically what that means is you have a temperature of the actual air and then you have a dew point temperature, which is basically the amount of moisture that's in the air. So if the development of those clouds will depend on that. When the temperature and dew point is close together, basically means the air is saturated, which is when a cloud forms. So yeah, top is wherever level the vertical developments aren't strong enough to accommodate a continuous growth of this type of cloud. So Cumulus Fractus, these will be sort of your initial indications of sort of more unstable conditions around. So obviously right now they're they haven't developed into a nasty big looking cloud yet, but they have the ability to. Cumulus, so that'll be the next stage from your Cumulus Fractus. So you can see they're starting to become bigger. Some of them will join together. Usually what happens is you can see these are sort of building over hills, mountains. So cumulus clouds, a lot of the time, will build over terrain. So especially here in the valley in the summers, you'll see it over the lake. That'll actually be pretty clear, but over the mountain ridges over the side, you'll actually see these cumulus type clouds start to build up. That's because as the day goes on in the afternoon, the ground heats up, obviously with the sun sort of glaring on it all day, it becomes hot, starts creating these vertical currents and starts building this. And obviously over the lake is cooler. As anyone who's swam in the lake in the summer, you'll notice it's usually a nice cool experience if it's 30 degrees outside. So it's colder over the lake, so they don't tend to form right above that. Then we have even more nasty looking clouds. So the next stage up, we got towering cumulus, or TCU for short. So the arrows basically point to a lot of vertical currents. There's a lot of air in these clouds that's being pushed up and down. So obviously we can expect quite some turbulence in the vicinity of these. We don't want to fly right through them because you'll fly yourself right into those updrafts and downdrafts, things like that. And it'll be a bit of a bumpy ride. So as pilots, you know, a lot of more sophisticated airplanes out there have weather radar and air traffic control, and they can see all these kind of things, and you can sort of divert your heading to fly around it rather than through it. And then we have the icing on the cake, the Cumulonimbus, or the CBs. So they're thick, heavy, and dense. Obviously, they're very intimidating. So these are a very big issue with airplanes. We do not want to fly through these, and we try and avoid them with quite some substantial distance because obviously we have a lot of lightning associated with these ones. Heavy rain or hail could be present in that cloud as well. A lot of air moving up and down, so a lot of turbulence associated with them. So the cumulonimbus clouds definitely are something that no pilot wants to fly through. All right, well, that basically summarizes a quick intro to the couple different types of clouds we have and how they form and how we can identify them.
Cool. Thanks, sir, Michael.
Yep.
That was good. I'll get you to end your slideshow there. Stop your sharing. Cool. Well, thanks. People have always asked me what's the most important part of aviation as far as the academic side goes, and aside from the business stuff and everything. The weather is the one thing that you need to know and understand well, because even when you decide not to go, it's usually because you're deciding that the weather isn't adequate, right? So it's something that you're always using. I'm just going to share a screen here. It's the NAV Canada is our provider of weather service in Canada. And if you can take a look, can you see the screen here? I'm not going to dig too much into this, but this is the way the weather looks when we look it up here. Right here for Kelowna, it's telling us now. We learn how to interpret this, but right there, it's telling us that the winds or the weather is reported automatically by a station out at the airport. That's the auto word. The winds are only 3 knots, so that's about 4 or 5 miles an hour, and they're coming out of the south. The visibility is at least 9 miles, and the first clouds aren't until you get up to 14,000 feet. And then it's a wonderful 8 degrees out there, thankfully, because it's spring. So that's the way that the weather is presented to us. We do get pictures. Pilots love pictures. So we have to learn to interpret these types of things too. So, and this is an area that shows British Columbia, and the pictures show where the turbulence could be, or freezing precipitation and those types of items. So anyway, just a little bit, not to dig too much into that. We'll stop sharing that one. And well, I've got everybody here. I'm just going to share one other screen, and this is something that you can actually dazzle your friends with if you haven't been there on this website before. It's called Flight Radar 24. So if you look at the top, if you just type in Flight Radar 24, then you can go to finding where Kelowna is. And any of these airplanes on there, you can click on them. It talks about what type of airplane it is, where it's going. If you look at this side, it tells you here it's going from Edmonton to Vancouver, when it's supposed to get there. It talks about what kind of aircraft it is, the registration, what altitude it's at, how fast it's going, and there's neat little charts and stuff like that. So that's something you can just dazzle your friends with. That's a little bit of an aside on all of this. There. So Sarah Jane, do you want to take it back a little bit here?
Hi, yeah, sorry. Thanks so much, everyone. So Vanessa and Michael are flight instructors. Mark is the program director at Southern Interior Flight Center, and my name is Sarah Jane. So I am the business advisor and recruiter for the program at Okanagan College School of Business. So we did have a question that was admission requirements. So it depends on when you're applying for the program. So if you have, it's called a PPL, so your private pilot license, you can apply for the September intake. And if you have not yet completed your private pilot license, you'll actually do it within the program in the January intake. So that's when you're going to want to apply for it. You're going to have your BC secondary school education for mature students or its equivalent. Your English 12 with a minimum of 60% or different alternatives. And then you're going to have your aviation category 1 aviation medical as well. So that does go through Transport Canada. So it does take a bit of time. It usually takes, Mark was saying, about 3 months. So in the process, you're definitely going to want to plan before you apply to get that done and get your results back. And you're also going to have a letter of recommendation from Southern Interior Flight Center indicating successful completion of a personal interview and altitude test and proof of financial ability as well. So Mark himself is probably going to be the one who's interviewing everyone. So you got to get familiar with Mark. He's going to be your person to go to. And then you're also going to have proof of ability to meet Transport Canada Aviation Language proficiency requirements. So that's just your English as well. So those are the main admission requirements. When you apply, you're going to be applying through Okanagan College. So that's just through our website. I actually posted the link already in the chat. So there's more information about the program and the details there and admission requirements, and everything is going to be on there. So if you do apply, you're going to be applying through a different website. So it's actually a government one that is through Okanagan College. It's kind of confusing, but if you have any questions, I put my email in there in the chat as well for any help. So it's actually called Education Planner. So you're going to have to set up an account there, and then you're going to have to click Okanagan College, and it will prompt you through which program you want to apply for. And then also you're going to apply for the commercial aviation diploma one there if that's what interests you. And then, yeah, so if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. Mark, I don't know if you want to touch on anything on your side, because it is kind of split between Southern Interior Flight Center and Okanagan College with admission requirements. So we kind of process it all, but Mark is the one who kind of goes through the personal interview and all that stuff.
Yeah, because part of the admission requirements are Transport Canada specific items, and Transport Canada changes very often as to what they're looking for various things, be it the type, how the medicals are done, or things like language proficiency. On our website that links off the Okanagan College website, maybe I'll just share it here quickly. If you look over here, we're in the midst of revamping our website, but under our current website, if you look at the top corner here, there's an FAQ box. And if you click on that, it takes you to our FAQ page. And the section on medicals about midway down at the table is very important because it tells you what kind of medical you need and where you can get it. And if you click on that, it'll eventually take you to a Transport Canada search engine. Medicals have to be done by pilots, commercial pilots, on an annual basis. So once you get one, you're going to have to keep getting it. And yeah, as Sarah Jane mentioned, it does take some time to get it. So we always recommend that when you're first starting to think about becoming a commercial pilot, even if it's early, grade 10, 11, something like that, by all means, get an aviation medical done. That way you know if you actually qualify to hold the medical and the license. And what'll happen is you'll go to the doctor's appointment, even if they say that you're fine, you can hold the medical. It doesn't really mean anything because they have to send it off to Transport Canada in Vancouver, and it takes about 3 months to hear back. So that's the delay. It's a little bit of a bureaucracy. You might think 3 months is a long time, but right now in Ontario, it's 6 to 9 months to get an answer back. So BC's ahead. So. But other than that, the suitability interview that you go through, you'll get a set of interview questions in advance that we review first. Then the interview itself only lasts about a half hour. Right now we're doing that through Zoom. And a lot of it is just to make sure you know exactly what you're getting into, because there's a lot of expense to these programs. There's a lot of dedication and time. And although money and jobs are fantastic a little bit later on, your first jobs are entry-level jobs, and the money's not as good as, you know, the airline captain type stuff. So it takes a while to kind of work through into that. So we just want to make sure that everybody's really investigated the industry and knows what they're getting into.
I did also want to just touch on the program itself. So this program is 2 years. So that is in corporation with business administration courses. So it is cohort, meaning everything does have to be taken at the same time. A lot of people ask if they can take business administration courses before to lighten their load. Fortunately, since it is cohort, we do have it all together. And honestly, is to instill organizational professionalism within the student, because commercial airlines do look for that. That's kind of what I feel like differentiates us from other programs. So you're going to be taking 2 business administration courses per semester for a total of 8 over the course of the 2 years. So the business administration courses will start in the September or January, depending on when you're applying for the program. So there'll be 4 months. And within that time, you're going to be taking, on top of your 2 business administration courses, you're going to be taking your flight, your ground school. We also do have a simulator. So I think it's fascinating. It's actually located at our Kelowna campus. So every person or student who is going to be in this program, you do have to have access to transportation to the Kelowna International Airport and also to the Kelowna campus, Okanagan campus. So the campus is where we will be doing simulation training. I think it's so cool. I've watched some students go in there before. So it is pretty much a cockpit of the aircraft. So it's just kind of the front end of it. And there are 2 seats, and the instructor is going to be simulating it. So it's actually computer simulated. So you're going to usually have 2 different people in the seats, and then the instructor is going to throw in like different weather patterns or anything like that. And you actually can feel it. So it actually does move. It's really cool. So I think that's a really cool portion that it's not really highlighted anywhere on our program information, but it's super neat. So also right now, all of our business courses are online, obviously due to COVID. Unfortunately, nothing's face-to-face with our business courses, but flight training is going to be face-to-face, obviously, with the protocols with COVID-19. And then some of the flight like training, like lectures, will be online as well. So it is a bit of a mixture. Hopefully, we're fingers crossed everything goes back soon so we can go face to face, because it is a bit of a different experience. But I think honestly, even with it right now, we've had a year to kind of assess the situation. And I personally think we've done a pretty good job, because we're still get to do obviously all the flight training, and nothing's held back. We still get the flight hours and all that. So I think that's really great. So yeah, we had a question about emission requirements. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat, and we'd be happy to answer them. If you don't feel comfortable popping in the chat, I do have my email in there. So it's just sschofield@okanagan.bc.ca. Mark and I love to answer any questions students have. So we're more than happy to do that. So feel free, please, to send me an email. And we did record the session again, because we did have that comment. So we will be posting it actually to Okanagan College's website after this, so you can have access to it after.
Yeah, and when we're not in pandemic phase, we always have an open door policy out here for tours and that type of thing. Of course, right now we're just trying to protect our student cohorts that are in here. So, but you know, as things lighten up, you know, we're more than happy to give people tours, you know, show them the airplanes, stick them in our simulators that we've got out at the airport here too. They're a little bit more basic, but it's a little bit of an experience, and there's no charge for any of that. So it's a good way to find out what happens out here at the airport.
And like I said, I did it yesterday, and I highly recommend it. So I think if we don't have any more questions, we can probably end it here. Like I said, this will be posted online again, and feel free just to email me. My email is in the chat. And then Mark, I don't know if you want to pop your email there as well, but we're the ones who kind of coordinate back and forth and answer students or any questions, inquiries. So we'd be happy to do so.
You betcha. I will do that right now. And I just want to thank Michael and Vanessa for helping out. They've been here since about 7 o'clock this morning. So
appreciate it.
Airplane flying and stuff like that. So
it's awesome. Thanks so much, guys. We'll probably stay in a couple of seconds just so everyone gets the information they need from the chats. And then, yeah, thank you so much, everyone, again for joining.
Good. Thanks a lot.